if you add millions of people to a housing market where the government is already making it illegal or slow or expensive to build new houses, the prices are going to go up. It's not politics, it's not propaganda. That's just basic supply and demand. It's just basic economics. Yet, here's a clip from a few months ago of some guests on CNN acting confused by this very simple fact.
His point was simply that if you put 10 or 20 million new people into the pool, whether they're illegal or not, that is going to increase competition for the already short supply of housing. If you already have a shortage of something and you add 20 million people who are trying to get that something,
I guess what
necessarily
I'm asking for,
you're going to have a problem.
I guess what I'm asking for is actual proof of that being.
There's no
actual
correlation
proof of
between
basic
the
economic
increases.
principles.
But I think
I mean,
This is more people
I am
trying to buy
asking
fewer
you-
commodities.
Listen, I'm asking you, is there proof that what you are saying actually happened? Because the immigrants came,
But no.
the
I think
prices were what they
You're-
were.
where do they
Is
live,
there-
Abby?
is
They
there
live-
is
they
there
live
proof that
somewhere.
that
I
actually
think that
happened?
Scott is actually right on the 50,000 point.
So this conversation has resurfaced today because of some new data or a working paper that came out of the Federal Reserve. It did show that illegal immigration increased prices, but I'm going to start by showing you what the claims are going around on social media, and it really goes back to this post, this article from the New York Post, whose headline is Biden's illegal immigration surge triggered 30% rise in home prices, 20% in rents, Fed paper fines. Scott Jennings, who was in the clip that we just played, says, revisiting this debate from February, turns out I was right. Putting millions of illegals in the housing pool drove up prices according to the Federal Reserve. Supply and demand is still a thing, it turns out. And listen, it is the case that if you add in millions of more people in that demand and you do not increase the supply commensurate with that demand, you're going to get higher prices. That's the case. But I still want to stick on how people are portraying this and then go through what the paper actually said. America PAC is saying illegal aliens are putting a financial strain on Americans. This is just another reason deportations are necessary. Caroline Levitt says Joe Biden's illegal immigration surge triggered 30% rise in home prices, 20% in rents, Fed paper fines. Homeland Security, DHS Gov on X, says the solution to high housing costs, mass deportations. Benny Johnson said the Federal Reserve just confirmed what every American already felt in their wallet. Joe Biden's illegal alien surge drove home prices to rise by 30% and rent by 20%. So let's go to the article that everyone is referencing. This is from the New York Post. The headline, as I read earlier, says Biden's illegal immigration surge triggered 30% rise in home prices, 20% in rents, Fed paper fines. A new Federal Reserve working paper found that the record surge in illegal immigration during the Biden administration triggered higher home prices and rents. It's true. This is where they get to what eventually makes the headline and the content of everyone's post. But they say it a little bit differently. In fact, the New York Post says it a little bit differently than what their headline even says. The economists estimate unauthorized immigrant worker flows accounted for about 30% of employment growth, roughly 30% of home price growth, and 20% of rent growth in the average metropolitan area between March 2021 and March 2024. They stress these estimates apply to the average metro area studied and do not suggest immigration was the sole driver of rising costs nationwide. So there's a really big difference in how they just said this and how it's being posted around online. Don't get me wrong. It is absolutely the case that if you have millions of people come in and the supply does not rise to meet that demand, the prices are going to go up. But we have a lot more problems in housing than just immigrants or illegal immigrants looking for houses. I do still think it's important for all of us to portray the data accurately. It's important, even if you just want to look at our political fights that we get in, that we don't say this data wrong, because then they're just going to respond and say, you don't even know how to read statistics, or you're just lying. And they're right about one of those things. And why don't we just say what the truth is, what the paper actually says? The article actually got the Fed paper correct, but the headline just completely misrepresented what their own article said about what the Fed paper said. So this Fed paper, great title here, The Impacts of Unauthorized Immigration on U.S. Labor and Housing Markets. New evidence from administrative microdata. Page turner. Let me tell you what. I got some notes here. I'm going to try and go over some of it. They were measuring net unauthorized immigrant worker flows, or from here on out, we'll refer to as UIWF. This means working age unauthorized immigrants or illegal immigrants likely to be employed. They used immigration court records, parole records, got-away estimates, removals, voluntary departures, and detentions. They mapped these flows into local labor markets and metro areas. They compared places that received more unauthorized immigrant workers with places that received fewer. They did not track every illegal immigrant to every house or apartment or to every place of employment that they could find. As you can see, it was people that they thought were likely to be employed, and they got to those numbers based on the age of the illegal immigrants. They didn't look at every sale of every house in each area to determine how many more people were bidding for that space or for that rental, whatever it was, that apartment. They didn't look at housing regulations or building codes in the area to distinguish whether or not immigrants were also going to places that have more restrictive supply policies. They simply determined that a 1% increase in the workforce led to a 2.2% increase in home prices. Illegal immigrants were 3% of the increased workforce, so they were a 6.6% increase in the home prices in those areas. And I'm saying all this very, very simply, but I don't want to go into too much detail on it. And this is what the paper actually says. Estimates yield an implied effect of UIWF on house prices of 6.6% and on rents of 4.3%. The total weighted mean increase in house prices and rents over this period were 22.4% and 22.6%, respectively. Putting these together for the average, they can explain approximately 30% of the total increase in house prices and 20% of the total increase in rents. Now, it's subtle, but that's a very different thing. 30% of the increase is not a 30% increase. So the total increase that they measured in this time span, and we'll get into how they came to this number, because when I say the number, you're going to be like, well, it's way more than that. It's got to be way more than that. The total increase that they measured in these areas was 22.4%. So how is it that illegal immigrants increased home prices by 30% when the total increase that they measured was 22.4%? What they found was the illegal immigrant share of that increase was 6.6%, and 6.6 is 30% of 22. That's how people are getting the 30% number. 30% of the increase were from illegal immigrants, not a 30% increase. Very different things. Why is this important? I promise I'm going to tell you why I'm picking on this today, why it bothers me that this is what people are going with. Besides the fact that it's not accurate, like I would just be really embarrassed. Like if I were just a conservative Republican or whatever, and I really, really cared about data, and all these big influencers and politicians were posting out this constant line, they increased prices by 30%. And it's wrong. It's literally wrong. Like I'm a little bit embarrassed. Isn't it just a little bit embarrassing to have that many people posting this out? It's literally not true. Okay. But even when you hear that number, you're like, well, that doesn't sound right. That's got to be more than that. I've got this chart from the Federal Reserve. It's indexed to 2019 right now, just so you know. So 2019 equals 100 on this chart, just so I could get like what the all transactions house price index for the United States is. And I picked 2019 because when we think about inflation that's occurred recently for all of us, a lot of us are comparing to pre-COVID. COVID was a massive economic shock for all of us. And when we think about how much prices have increased, most of us are thinking that since before COVID, BC. And that's been about a 67% increase since 2019. Now, if we index the same thing to 2021, March of 2021, then you see that there's actually a 36% increase on this. But this isn't even the data that the Fed used for this working paper. They used data from Zillow called the Zillow Home Value Index. It's different. And I put this in ChatGPT just so I come up with the easiest explanation on what's different here. So they used a weighted average MSA level Zillow Home Value Index, which takes the Zillow home value changes in individual metro areas and averages them and gives more weight to larger metro areas, as opposed to the main index that we're just looking at, which is just all of the U.S., just all the housing prices and just everything. Not only that, the Zillow index only looks at homes that are in the 35th to 65th percentile ranges, so it's a specific subset of homes, and then in specific areas, and it's a weighted average according to the population of the cities that they're comparing. So it's a little different from like that national U.S. housing price change that we see really often. So that's what the Fed used. I had a lot of thoughts on this. I typed them out earlier, and I just want to make sure that I get across why this is so important. And then we'll go into what the rest of the issue is, because it is an issue. Housing has gone up a lot. This is a real pain that people are feeling, whether it's 34% since 2021 or 2021 to 2024, as one of those graphs show that I just had up on the screen, or if it's 60 or 70% since before COVID, or if it's actually 22.4%, like that Zillow weighted average shows from 2021 to 2024. Well, it's 2026 now, so we're still dealing with even more than the 22% since that time. It's an issue. We're all dealing with it, for sure. Bringing in millions of people that are bidding for homes, mostly actually rental spaces, which also bids up the value of properties, which makes the homes more expensive as well. It's going to cause issues, for sure. But is it like the main issue? Is it the main driving factor? Well, the working paper here from the Fed found that it was 30% of the issue in specific metropolitan areas. That's what the Fed paper actually found. So it's a little bit different, not as flashy. Not going to give you a viral post or anything if you say it that way. So that's why people are saying it the other way. So I typed this out earlier. I wanted to read it to make sure I didn't forget anything. And I'll start, since I already explained all this, I started off saying the left wants to pretend illegal immigration had no effect on housing prices. The right wants to pretend it's the main driver in price increases. And I just want people to tell the truth. Even if it's not crazy and flashy, it might be boring, but at least it's the truth. At least it's the actual data. A massive increase in demand without commensurate increase in supply will increase prices. That is basic economics. This is supply and demand. Our housing problem is a problem of supply and demand. Okay? So if you want to address the root cause, we got to look at supply and demand. I'm going to give you some examples from some other cities that have somewhat solved or are working on solving this problem as much as it can be solved. I said governments at all levels are holding down supply. This is a fact. Rent control holds down supply. Why? Why are people going to come in and invest in building new units in areas where there's strong rent control? They're not going to. Environmental regulations, lengthy review processes, building codes, zoning laws, all those things hold down supply. One thing that makes this issue very difficult is that housing is mostly a local issue, state and local issue, but mainly local. And so it's difficult. We don't pay as much attention to what's going on in our local areas. I know more about what's going on nationally than I do in my county. I do. It's what I see most of the news about. It's what I find more interesting. It's what more people are talking about, obviously. You can find these things out, and we should all do a better job at that. Another thing, increased interest rates hold down supply. The federal government's unwillingness to balance a budget increases the interest rates. What do I mean? They got to keep borrowing money. This is a big issue. They need people to fund their debt. If they're not just going to simply print it, they got to get people to buy their bonds. Those bonds have to be competitive. First off, they have to outpace inflation. So the rate on the bonds needs to be more than the value that they're going to lose over time, letting the government borrow that money. And they have to compete with other things that people can put their money into. So the rate of the bonds goes up. Inflation caused by money printing and borrowing increases interest rates. This not only increases the monthly cost of owning a home, which has been a really big driver over the last few years, for sure. It disincentivizes people from leaving their lower rate mortgages and putting their current homes on the market, which also decreases supply. This is happening in my household right now. I've got a pre-COVID era mortgage, high 2% range. I would like to go get a new home. If it were the same mortgage rate, I could go get that new home, which would be probably 50% more than what I would sell my house for, but that'd be fine if I could get that lower mortgage rate. But I can't. I'm going to get a mortgage rate that's like double to triple what my current mortgage rate is. I don't want to do that. So I'm staying in my house. Well, my house is a first-time home buyer house. This is my first home. It is a first-time home buyer house. And I could leave and go to a second-time home buyer house somewhere nearby in a better neighborhood, but I'm not going to. So I'm holding down the supply. I'm taking supply off the market that would otherwise be there for people who want to come in and buy a cheaper home. I'm staying in my cheaper home instead of leaving and going to a nicer one. Thus, not putting that home on the market decreases supply. The demand matters too. Illegal immigration increases demand. Legal immigration increases demand. Household formation increases demand. What I mean by that is, are people staying together, getting divorced, having kids, or the kids moving out? Investors increase demand. Yeah, people come in and buy houses. They do. Big companies, they have seen that this is a good investment for them, and so they're coming in and buying that. Easy money increased demand. Artificially low interest rates that we had for a long time brought in a lot of people buying up those houses. Every single one of those things matters. Don't worry, I'm going to go into a city like Austin, who's done a good job fixing some of these problems as much as they can. If you want affordable housing, secure the border, sure, but also make it legal and easier to build housing, reform zoning, speed up permitting, end rent control. Stop pretending politicians can print, borrow, regulate, restrict, and subsidize their way into affordability. It cannot be done. It continues to make the problem worse. Almost everything the government gets involved in restricts the supply and increases the demand, which leads to higher prices, which leads for more arguments for the government getting even more involved in that thing. They restrict supply, they increase the demand over and over again. And then we have high prices and people look around and say, how did this happen? Well, rarely will you find people in the government that will point at themselves and say that they are the root cause of the problem. But in this case, they are. Actually, all the problem. Yeah, our border laws were ignored. We let millions of people across the border. And even if you want people to come across the border, you can't say, well, there's a certain amount. You got to say, well, you can't handle that big of an influx all at one time. And sure, we should deregulate housing. We should be able to build more, but there's still just like a point where it's not physically possible to build them that fast, right? And so even if you want like open borders or whatever, which I don't think anyone listening to me right now is going to want that, you still have to think, well, there's got to be a limitation to how many at one time can come in. or how many over a span of 3 years can come in. It's going to increase prices. It's just going to. Unfortunately, this is not what people are talking about today. We're going to point to one source of the problem. We're going to say it's illegal immigrants. That is a part of the problem. It is, in fact, a part of the problem, but it's not the direct root cause source of the problem. I want to tell you first, before we get into this, what Austin did. This is actually a recent article from Vox, of all places, called How Austin's Stunning Drop in Rents Explains Housing in America. So they say one success story stands out among all the rest. Austin, Texas, where rents dropped by a full 6% over the past year, more than in any other large metro area in the U.S. The Austin area's median rent at $1,274 is back to roughly where it was right before the pandemic, which means that in today's dollars, it's actually cheaper than it was in 2019. That's pretty crazy. For the past decade, Austin has been a standard bearer for the YIMBY, Yes in My Backyard movement, passing a barrage of policy changes to make it easier to build new housing, especially new apartment buildings. According to a recent report from Pew, these reforms are responsible in large part for the sharp drop in rents enjoyed by Austinites over the last several years. I want to show you some of the things they did. Just simple things. Like, wow, this is crazy. This is crazy. Updating zoning codes across parts of the city to automatically allow the construction of tall apartment buildings in some places rather than requiring each to go through a long and costly permitting process. Reducing, and later in 2023, eliminating parking minimums for virtually all new homes. Elsewhere in the U.S., parking mandates, or a minimum number of off-street spaces available per unit, make housing more expensive and sometimes physically impossible to build, making it significantly easier to build accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, which are smaller homes that sit alongside houses on single-family lots. Each one of these things, when the government is preventing you from doing them or making it take way longer to be able to do it, those increase the price. They just do. Allowing up to 3 homes to be built on lots zoned for single-family houses, and greatly cutting down the minimum lot size required to build a single-family home, encouraging builders to add small, less expensive starter homes. Creating density bonuses that allow developers to build taller in exchange for setting aside some units as income restricted at lower rents, an approach that, the Pew Report notes, has added more market rate and more affordable apartments. Let's see. Last year, Austin City Council voted to legalize apartment buildings up to 5 stories built with a single staircase instead of 2 staircases, required by default in most U.S. building codes. A long-time YIMBY holy grail because it can drop the cost of new buildings and open up more space and unit layout flexibility from 2 staircases to 1 staircase. Powerful stuff. Life-changing stuff. Actually, it was life-changing for a lot of people, so I don't even mean to say that as a joke. The rents have gone back down to their pre-COVID levels, and that is expressed in $2026, meaning that their rents in Austin are cheaper than they were before COVID, and they are the city that has been deregulating their housing. So back to Benny Johnson, who said, Federal Reserve just confirmed what every American already felt in their wallet. Joe Biden's illegal alien surge drove home prices to rise by 30% and rent by 20%. That's what happens when 7 million people flood into your country in a 3-year span. Some of that can be true, but I want to tell you the main issue I have with this. The biggest issue I have comes from being a libertarian who's part of a small minority of people who are laser focused on the government getting smaller, having less power over all of our lives. Very small minority of people who are actually trying to get that done, working to get that done, or at least want it to be done. But when I look at someone like Benny Johnson, who's got millions of followers, hundreds of thousands of people watching the streams every day, I'm just picking him out as an example. No hate specifically towards him. But what drives me nuts is there are so many people on the right, conservatives, Republicans, whatever you want to call them, millions of people. They've got actual political power. They win elections. They've got people in the Senate, the House, the presidency, over and over again. They've got voices and influencers that are able to organize people, that are able to focus people's attention toward certain subjects and certain goals. And I see them consistently misdirecting their followers. And I don't think it's intentional. I think, the New York Post headline offered a perfect timing for having a viral post. Perfect timing for having some kind of hot button political issue, left versus right, open borders people versus closed borders people. And it just gave everyone the opportunity to point and say, ha, told you. But what if all of that effort, all of that focus, all that hate were actually trained on decreasing the size of government? We're actually trained on attacking the root cause of the problem. A big cause of the problem right now is the fact that we still spend $2 trillion more every year than we take in. And we have to keep financing that over and over again. We have to keep getting new credit cards to pay off our previous credit cards. And we have to keep increasing the interest rates to entice people to come in and buy those bonds, which is causing the monthly price that new home buyers have to pay to continue going up and up a lot. That's a big issue. I would say the main issue that people are dealing with housing prices right now is the Federal Reserve and the U.S. government spending way more money than they have, and the Federal Reserve printing money that didn't exist in the first place and devaluing our currency. What if all these people were focused on that instead of just one specific thing? But then on top of that, I'm like, oh, okay, well, they're going to focus on one thing. They're focusing on it wrong. They're reciting the statistic wrong. And so now you're giving your political enemies room to deny your claims in the first place, which they might anyway, but now you're giving them something that's true to say back to you. They're going to either call you ignorant on statistics or they're going to call you a liar. And they'll be right about one of those things. You're either ignorant on the stats or you're just lying so you can get clicks. Those are the facts. You never give your political enemies, or any enemies for that matter, the opportunity to be right about you. What? Don't give that to them. Don't give them that win. Say what the stats actually say. 30% of the increase. Let's talk about what the other 70% was. We can focus on that 30%. That's fine. Trump is already focusing on that 30%. He's already closed off the border. He's already doing deportations. But there's another 70% in there that led to housing price increases that we're just not going to talk about today. None of these people with millions of followers, hundreds of thousands to millions of people listening to them every day are going to talk about those things. They're just going to play gotcha with the immigration thing and then move on to whatever the next viral talking point is and waste all of that focus, all of that effort, all of that potential for change, actual change, the 70% as opposed to the 30% change that could happen. Sad to see. That's all I got today. Thanks for hanging out. Leave a comment. What do you think? What did I miss? Probably a lot. It was pretty quick. It's only half an hour, so probably missed quite a few things. Let me know what you think. Hit subscribe, hit like, comment, leave a rating and review on your favorite podcast app. Do all those things. If you do all that, be back again tomorrow.